Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. We're here to talk a little bit about the Wendy Williams situation, the whole Wendy Williams fiasco. There's been new evidence with regards to her situation. We've talked a lot about her in the past, about her health issues, and about her legal issues, and how she, has been, um, mistreated, as it were, by people in her lives, people in her life, ex-husband. We talked about the movie. Hey, Lisa, what's going on? We talked about the movie. We talked about the documentary, and how I admire Wendy Williams, and how I was a fan of her, and how I met her in 1997 uh, here in Brooklyn at the Black Family Reunion in Prospect Park, and I dumped her into, or tried to dump her into the pool back then when she was on Hot 97. So let's uh, get into some of the discussion regarding her. Sabrina Massey was Wendy Williams' court appointed guardian. Basically, it was declared in 2002 that Wendy was not capable um, of taking care of her own finances. Her bank account was frozen. She was declared mentally incompetent. To be exact, she was placed under court guardianship. So the guardian was this girl named Sabrina Massey. Now imagine you're Wendy Williams, right? And you're going to your bank account and you have this very successful show. You know what I mean? David says he was watching the Wendy Williams movie. You have this very successful television show on TV, probably the number one rated talk show host of all time, because she had her struggles with drugs and alcohol addiction since the 1980s. Um, and she was kicked off of BLS. She was kicked off of Hot 97 for various reasons. Problems with radio DJs, there. But you're very successful. Despite all that, you bounce back and you have this very successful television show, syndication all over. And then you go to your bank account to withdraw money, and all of a sudden the bank account is frozen. And you're wondering why. And then you go to court for it, and they place you under this guardianship with this girl, Sabrina Massey. And they're telling you that you have cognitive decline when you know you didn't have cognitive decline. So that happens. Uh, David, good question. In 2023, she was diagnosed with frontal dementia and aphasia. She also has dealt with grave disease and lymphedema, lymph, lymphedema, something to do with the brain. And a lot of fans, like Lisa was saying, a lot of this was brought on by um, drinking and drugs. Wendy has had problems with drinking and drugs, particularly cocaine, since the 80s, since she started in radio. But in 2025, in January of this year, she went on a Breakfast Club and she went on a View and she said, I don't have cognitive decline. I'm doing perfectly fine mentally. So basically, this has been a fight of hers to get herself back, kind of like Britney Spears. We did a video years ago, Lisa and I did, on Britney Spears, in which Britney Spears was fighting to get herself back. She was also placed under guardianship. Now, yeah, exactly. Lisa's right. Bruce Willis also has The same thing. Britney Spears was placed under guardianship too. And we know that Britney Spears has been a battle for Britney Spears to try to get it back. I think it's similar to um, so they had the same thing. She is sending Bruce Willis. So it's been a battle for her to try to get it back. Same thing here with Wendy. Wendy also is battling this. Now, her husband, Kevin Hunter, in 2019, uh, she found out that her husband, Kevin Hunter, had an extramarital affair and fathered a child outside of the relationship. And they say this contributed to her mental decline. And obviously, of course, that is the case. That would usually be uh, the case for a lot of people because think about it. You know, you're in this relationship, you love this person, and you've sacrificed for this person. This person is not only your husband, but also a business partner of yours, and you discover that they're having an affair. Of course, that would tip anybody off, especially if they've already dealt with addiction. Uh, Wendy's show, Wendy's show was on the air from from 2008 to 2016. So that was 8 years. 8 years. And like I said, probably the dominant uh, talk talk show on television because uh, probably either the number one talk show on television, probably the number two, I would say, behind The View. But The View is a different demographic, appeals to a different. No, not necessarily bored, Lisa. It's just sorry, I sound more enthusiastic. The View is a different demographic than Wendy Williams. She dealt with more entertainment news, and they deal with more like political stuff. And there are a lot of them, so they're not carrying the load. Uh, it's not one person. It's a lot harder when it's one person carrying everything and trying to be entertaining. Whereas if it's a multitude of people, a lot of folks, then it's not as hard. No, David. Good Morning America might have started in 1975, but The View started in 1998, I believe, 97 or 98. The View is not that old. The View didn't exist in the 70s. Had it existed in the 70s, the political discussions would have been a lot more interesting because those were interesting times. Not that today modern times aren't interesting times, but could you imagine them? Well, 75 was after Watergate, but it still would have been on people's minds, or Watergate and the pullout from Vietnam, if the view had been, or even Iran Contra in '86, or the fall of the Berlin Wall in '89. That would have been interesting if the view existed back then, which it did not. But anyway, going back to um, Wendy Williams. Yeah, yeah. It's cool. Uh, she was basically robbed of her fame, robbed of her fortune, literally. And they showed her in the documentary as being very, in very worse condition. I feel like the documentary, the people that were behind the documentary, it was a defamatory documentary, basically, in my opinion, because it showed her in the worst possible light. Like you're looking at her like, oh man, this is really fucked up. Similar to the Michael Jackson documentary that aired in 2003. You know what I mean? Like, and these kind of documentaries, they shape your viewpoint on it. Her lawyer Joe Tapachino is was her appointed lawyer, so they're fighting this case to try and get her life back. I don't know if her show, what she'll be doing as far as broadcasting. This woman has been broadcasting. She's been in broadcasting um, since 1986. She worked in WBLS from 2001 to 2008, and she was also on Hot 97, but she was fired from in 1998. Now, an interesting reason why she was fired from Hot 97 in 1998, and that correlates to something in today's world, a person in today's zeitgeist, and political and social discussions. At least I'm hoping I'm sounding a little bit more lively. Is P. Diddy. She basically exposed P. Diddy for his activities. You know, what I mean, his homosexual activities way back in 1998, and they had her. Diddy at that time, Bad Boy was very popular. Lisa said she don't need to have her show back. Diddy was very popular in '97. Bad Boy was all over the radio, all over hip hop radio. So he said he'll pull his songs from Hot 97 if she remains. So she was then moved to the Hot 97 affiliate in Philadelphia. So he basically made a political maneuver, as well as her not getting along with other DJs there, namely Angie Martinez, for exposing Angie Martinez's relationship with a rapper at the time, Q-Tip, which is in Angie's book. Lisa says the show did her wrong as well. Lisa, what would you like to add as far as the show doing her wrong? What did they do? What did the show do to her that was fucked up? I'm not saying maybe she can rebuild and get another show. You know what I'm saying? She still has the ability. She still has the ability to verbalize. She still has the ability to talk, I think. They forced her off. Okay. Um, she did collapse on live TV. It was one of the Halloween episodes. I think it was 2016 or 17, where she collapsed on live TV. It was a Halloween episode. I remember 'cause she was dressed as the Statue of Liberty, and so maybe they were concerned for her health. They didn't want to see her die on live TV. I mean, she has issues. So they forced her off for a reason. It wasn't like they forced her off because of a political move like Hot 97 did. Hot 97 basically bent the knee to Diddy, and they found out she was right all along. You know, one thing about Wendy Williams, and I think even now, oh, because of the issue with her ex. Okay. Um, One thing about her, even now, is that you can accuse her, you can disagree with her, but you can never call her a liar because everything that she said about everybody turned out that it was right. Was said about Whitney Houston, that was right. Was said about Diddy, that was right. Was said about his other celebrities, that was right. And people don't like it. People like to silence you. Uh, those you can't convince, you silence, right? When you're doing stuff like this, when you're blowing the horn, as it were, you know, and exposing the people in this industry. Imagine if she had a show right now, what she'd be talking about with regards to the Epstein files, what she'd be talking about with regards to Diddy, what she'd be talking about with regards to Kanye West. and all these other celebrities. The Nicki Minaj Cardi B beef, MVP Day, yeah, Sherry Shepherd, yeah, I know that. Ah, was that real or I know he took her out, but I don't know if they actually dated because I remember when he was popular in the WWE at that time, uh, they showed it on The View. They showed she was on The View at that time, and they showed it. But they always try to silence, and Sherry took her spot. Yeah, thank you, David. That correlates to what we're talking about. And Sherry Shepard isn't as good because she's scared to take stances. People, she covered the Cardi B and Nicki Minaj beat that. I remember that. Yeah, is that the guest host era? 09 2010 on Monday Night Raw. Um, she talked about the Cardi B, Nicki Minaj beef, and she didn't take no stances. It's like, okay, don't just tell me, you get paid to be an on screen editorialist, not just a journalist. The difference between a journalist and an editorialist is an editorialist takes stances, they take positions. A journalist just tells you how it is. More news now since the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine back in the day is editorial, right? The Fairness Doctrine was a doctrine put in place that that basically dictated that journalists and reporters had to cover the news objectively. They had to cover both sides, and they weren't allowed to take stances. When that was repealed in the 1980s under Ronald Reagan's administration, then news became more editorialist based. And you saw the birth of political news like Fox News and later MSNBC. And I feel like Wendy Williams, although she wasn't hard news, she was entertainment. But it was kind of the same way. You know what I mean? Where you saw like you got people like Angie Martinez or Sherry Shepard. They don't take stances. They just report the news. But tell me what you think. Don't be afraid. Have the guts, or as Mick Foley would say, have the intestinal fortitude to go against these artists and challenge back and push back. I hate when a journalist sits there or a DJ or whatever. Funk Flex used to do this, and they sit there and they kiss the ass of the person that that they're interviewing or doing a story on. We don't like that. You know what I'm saying? We don't like that because it's boring. And we want you to push back and ask the hard questions. We want to make the interviewer uncomfortable. We don't just want to hear this bullshit, from the celebrity or the candidate or the person you're interviewing. We want hard questions. That's what a journalist should be. Hard questions. And Wendy Williams, although she was only covering entertainment, she was a journalist, in my opinion. A broadcast journalist. And when you're a journalist, your job, in my opinion, is to make the person feel uncomfortable. Ask the hard questions that we're all dying to know. Cardi B is hot. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I hate about Gayle King. Gayle King, well, she made R. Kelly uncomfortable. So that was one example where she did make somebody uncomfortable, and it became a fame. She had to try to have a beef with Sanaa Lathan. Wow. What was the beat up with Sanaa Lathan about? Sanaa Lathan seems like the most unbeefable human being, one of the most unbeefable human beings on the planet. She's non-confrontational. I can't, or I can't even imagine Sanaa Lathan uh, getting into a beef with someone. She just seems so sweet. You know what I mean? But okay, yeah. We're not saying hi. That's some bullshit. That makes no sense. Um, We know that's fake. Pardon me, guys. But yeah, Sherry Shepherd is boring. Uh, One thing Sanaa Lathan could have said to Sherry Shepherd that could have resulted in a sort of confrontation would have been like, "Hey, Sherry, the Earth is round. If if you're if you're a fan of the View, you remember that." No, Lisa doesn't remember that. Okay, years ago on an episode of The View, Sherry Shepherd came out as a flat earther. Let me see uh, what. It was in 2007 on an episode of The View where Sherry Shepherd said the Earth. She doesn't know if the Earth is flat or round, and basically, when you're a flat earther, I put you in the category of 9/11 truthers. I put you in the category of Holocaust deniers. I put you in a in the league of dumbassery. Like you're arguing about shit that has already been settled. You know, they're not up for debate. The Earth is spherical. Okay, so people like Bob, people like Lord Jamar, people like Sherry Shepherd. No, Sherry Shepherd curses a lot. I don't know. I don't watch her show. I think she sucks. I think all these girls trying to take the place of Wendy Williams all suck. Jay Hud, Jennifer Hudson, no good. I don't like her. Kelly Clarkson, please. There's only one and only. You know what I mean? Oh, Wendy Williams' attorney defended ASAP Rocky in his felony gun charges recently. So he's a pretty good lawyer. He's probably one of those like Tom Mesereau, which was Michael Jackson's lawyer, or Johnny Cochran, or formerly Alan Dershowitz. But Alan Dershowitz himself is in some hot water right now with regards to something that we'll be talking about in the future, which is the Epstein case. But yeah, Lisa says Jay Hunt isn't trying. Well, okay, all right, you know better than I do, but I just look at them all as cheap imitations, in my opinion, because Wendy broke the mold as far as an entertainment news show. Because she wasn't afraid to ask the hard questions. And that's what you got to be as a journalist. She did it on the radio and she did it on TV. She revolutionized radio first and TV after that. Ellen was boring too. I never liked her show. They aren't journalists. I would say that Wendy Williams was a journalist, Lise. I would say that she was. She went to school in Northeastern University in Boston with the intent of becoming a television anchor. So how was she not a journalist? Okay, yeah. Oh, you're saying that Jennifer Hudson is not a journalist? Oh no, I know she's not. You know what I mean? She's just an entertainer uh, with a television show. I know. Jenny Hutt is a comedian. I mean, a singer. And Sherry. Okay, yeah. Okay, my bad, you. I'm just saying. I look at somebody interviewing celebrities, and I compare it to Wendy Williams, even though it may not be the same thing. You know, when they're talking about celebrity entertainment news, regardless if they went to school for journalism or not, or they're officially a journalist, they're doing journalistic things. Yeah, but Oprah is a journalist, though. She worked on the news prior to having her own television show. Yeah, but Oprah didn't do celebrity news. I mean, she did probably in the early days, but she didn't really get famous for that. Wendy's a shock jock. Okay, yeah, so you could compare to other shock jocks like Star and Buck Wow, Howard Stern. Howard Stern is probably number one, and Wendy is probably number two in terms of that sort of. Oprah is the Barbara Walters, the Baba Wawa. Now, Barbara Walters is like the Hulk Hogan, and Oprah is like the Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know what I mean? Like, uh, they're kind of the same thing. But Barbara was hard journalism. Barbara was interviewing politicians. Barbara was interviewing. Oprah wasn't interviewing. Oprah was like interviewing like people like Dr. Oz, Dr. Phil, fucking, these people, right? Spiritual gurus, big making people famous. But initially, when she got famous, when she made her bread and butter in the 1980s, she was just interviewing regular people. So she's kind of like Sally Jesse Raphael or Phil Donahue, talk shows. Not really in the celebrity wing, even though she did kind of interview celebrities sometimes. Like Oprah's most famous, Oprah, I think, was the first person on TV to ever interview like skinheads and shit like that in the 80s. Like that was one of her most famous shows. Stephen A. Smith, oh God, he's terrible. A lot of people hate his takes. He was doing sports, but he's kind of he kind of sucks. And like people hate his political takes. But Wendy was doing this celebrity shit. David knows this person. I would have loved to have seen him do real news. Is Bobby the Brain Heenan? He was the broadcast journalist, in my opinion. But he only did wrestling. But I would have loved to have seen him do other stuff besides wrestling because he was funny, and he inspired me to become a broadcast journalist. And Wendy Williams inspired me to want to become a broadcast journalist too. When I met her, probably Bobby Heenan, Angie Martinez, and Wendy. All those three. Because he tries to talk about entertainment stuff and got himself in trouble. He tried to talk about politics and he didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. I think there are certain things that a journalist should stick to. You can't be everybody to every. You can't serve. He who serves too many masters ends up serving none. Because if your thing is sports, stick to sports. You know what I mean? Like, and try to be the Howard Cosell of your era. If your thing is entertainment, try to stick to that. You know what I mean? Like Wendy. Wendy's the number one in entertainment. Wendy didn't delve too much into politics. She didn't delve too much into hard news all that much. Because in the news world, there are two types of news. There's hard news and soft news. Hard news is usually it's politics. Usually it's geopolitics, interviewing Mike Milbury. No, I never heard of him. What does he do? Sports? See, I wouldn't know that many sports people because I don't follow sports. But hard news is like usually you get to interview like people like world leaders, like you'll interview Putin, Netanyahu, Trump, Obama, individuals like that. Soft news is like entertainers. But Wendy would get herself into trouble because she wouldn't just interview them, she would confront them and she would try to dig up dirt on them, which was something that they weren't really used to, especially entertainers, because entertainers are used to going on these radio shows and having these disc jockeys uh, kiss their ass. Okay, he's an NHL guy, would definitely not know. But kiss their ass, and Wendy didn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, and celebrities don't like it when these people are like this. You know what I mean? Like, especially the bigger the celebrity, the more cautious they are with who they let interview them. For example, Drake. Drake would never allow Wendy Williams to interview him. Beyonce would never allow Wendy Williams to interview her because they would ask him things that would make him uncomfortable. Drake is very selective, and so is Beyonce. You never see Drake or Beyonce doing any kind of sit down interviews at all. And if they do, they give the reporter or the disc jockey a list of approved questions that they could ask. Um, and the person can't go beyond those questions. And usually the questions are bullshit questions. You know what I mean? Like, what's your favorite food? Like, things like that. And nobody wants to know about that. Nobody cares about things like that. And like things like that. Speaking of Oprah, you can see him in hockey. Speaking of Oprah, Lisa, I would say her biggest interview is probably as far as a celebrity is Michael Jackson in 1993. That was the first interview, sit down interview, one of the first few sit down interviews that Michael Jackson ever did. And he felt completely uh, comfortable with that. Like, he trailed off. She was doing an interview with him, and he trailed off, and he started beatboxing. And it was like she was left just looking at her cue cards, like. But with the shock jock people like Wendy, celebrities were a little bit like other shock jocks. People are not afraid. Funny because people are not afraid to go, or were never afraid to go when he was on syndication on Howard Stern. Celebrities would be cool going on Howard Stern because all he would ask, like they called him a shock jock, but he wasn't shock jock in a different way. He wasn't confrontational like Wendy. He was just asking sex questions, and nobody's really afraid of that. You know what I mean? Unless you're like Bill Clinton or Donald Trump, and they're going to ask you about inappropriate sexual actions. But nobody's really afraid of that. You know what I mean? Like, but when it gets to like drug use, like Wendy got into the confrontation with Wendy got into the confrontation with Whitney, or things about your personal life, like Diddy's sexuality, which he never wanted to be let out. But it was pretty much an open secret that he was bisexual and that he liked men and women. You know what I mean? Nobody knew about the Diddy parties, but people had said for years, because of Wendy Williams' reporting, that he was bisexual and that he was into men and women, and more so into men. You know what I mean? That was well known. I think I don't know who it was. I think it was Wendy. I'm not sure that said that about Alicia Keys' sexuality as well. Alicia Keys was bisexual, and another pretty much open secret that people have known about for years in the music business, but have never really said anything about. Kind of hush hush on the low with that. And she had sources. It wasn't like Jaguar Wright. Jaguar Wright is another person that she never confronts these celebrities, but she has no sources. Wendy has sources. Jaguar Wright will just come out with shit, and you'd be like, well, where are you getting this from? You know what I mean? You have to cite your sources. Otherwise, it's defamation, in the legal system. You just can't say things about people without no backup. And that's what separates the men from the boys, as it were, or the girls from the women in this case, is your sources. You just can't say things. And then if you have no balls to say it in front of them, then it doesn't really count, does it? Like Wendy would say it to them while they were in the studio or while they were on the phone, and she wasn't afraid of the repercussions. Whereas Jaguar Wright says it on other shows like Vlad TV and shit, where Beyonce and Jay-Z are nowhere around. And like Tasha K is another one. Uh, they're nowhere around, so you're just talking shit. And like, nah, they're not gonna do anything to you because they don't know you, they don't care about you. You're just saying stuff. You know what I mean? So you have to be a shock jock with a purpose, rather than just being a shock jock for shock's sake, just saying shit. Now, somebody that's took it too far was Star and Buck, mocking Aaliyah's death and shit. Like, there's certain lines you don't cross. You have to know where that line is. Even in politics, being a political commentator, there's certain lines you just don't go to. And sometimes when you do, you get caught out there. David says he loves Cardi B. He'll kiss her. Well, I'm going to her concert on the 26th of March, David. So maybe, I'll take a picture of her on stage and send it to you. So, but yeah, I would have loved to have seen Wendy Williams when this Cardi B and Nicki beef popped off, because, or even when Trump, she commented on Trump, Trump's initial rise, because she was friends with Trump for years. You can't be in the entertainment industry like she was and not have rub elbows with Donald, because Donald was so well known in that arena. But unfortunately, she was silenced for various reasons, and I think a lot of times her haters were the ones conspiring to silence her because she was so influential and because she had such a huge following. The bigger the following, the more dangerous the person becomes. Anyway, guys, thank you, Lisa and David, for contributing. Thank you, Lisa, really for contributing, because Lisa was the one who really gave me a lot of this information on Wendy's case. And I hope Wendy wins the case. You know what I mean? I hope she really, um, podcasting is an option, because a lot of people that have been kicked off their shows, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. I see, maybe I'm wrong, but I see a lot of uh, Wendy Williams and Candace Owens. I see a lot of Wendy's influence in Candace. Maybe Candace is a little bit more political, but Candace does, you know, um, confronts. Candace does confront celebrities too. She has, um, you know, confronted celebrities, and she's made a way for herself on the internet. So is Tucker. So I mean, what do you think, Lisa? Do you think is Kansas Owens is influenced by Wendy Williams at least a little bit? I think so. You know, but she does get ridiculous. This whole Brigitte Macron thing, Emmanuel Macron's wife. But hey, who knows? We used to think Wendy Williams was ridiculous, the stuff she would say about certain celebrities, and it turned out to be true. So, I mean, who knows? Uh, um, but once you start getting sued, then you've earned your street credibility. You know what I mean? It's the journalistic equivalent of a rapper getting shot. You know what I mean? Like you earned your badge. You know what I mean? Like you're getting sued now, so people are paying attention to you. But I think Kansas works better in the celebrity wing. I think too too hard into the political wing. She was being used as a tool for Republicans, and now she's on her own, and she's become more popular. We have a video on her, but definitely she's influenced Wendy. A lot of these other gossip reporters try to be like Whitney. I mean, Wendy. Like people will say Wendy took her cues from Joan Rivers. Like Joan Rivers was doing the shock jock thing before her, but Joan Rivers was just rude. Like there's a difference between being a shock jock and being a bitch. Yeah. You know, and like Joan Rivers was mean spirited. Joan Rivers was rude, and Joan Rivers, I blame her for starting the rumor that former First Lady Michelle Obama was a trans person. Like which was stupid. You know what I mean, with no evidence whatsoever. Uh, yeah, it was Joan Rivers. Yeah, in like 2012, 2011. Let me look it up right now. Yeah, it was 2014. 2014 it was where Joan Rivers uh, said that about Michelle Obama, former First Lady Michelle Obama. Before she said that, nobody was saying that. And then she died soon after. And rumors surfaced among Republicans that the Obamas had her assassinated and killed because she said that. you know, there was a there was a conspiracy theory that she said, what was the exact quote? I'll send you the clip, Lisa. Hold on. Yeah, Lisa, I just sent it right now in your inbox. But that's uh because where it stems from was there was a thing where a press conference where Barack Obama was talking about one of his colleagues, a man named Michael, and he goes, Michael and I, right? And they immediately clipped that into saying that he meant that he was talking about Michelle and that her real name is Michael. You know what I mean? That's where the hashtag Big Mike comes from. You know, and people picked it up and ran with it, and it became basically a slander. That wasn't the reason why Joan Rivers died. That's bullshit. That's a bullshit conspiracy theory. Joan Rivers died because of her addiction to plastic surgery. She was a plastic surgery addict, and she was too old to be getting plastic surgery at her advanced age, almost like in her 80s, right? And she couldn't stop herself, and she got one, and she passed away, unfortunately. It had nothing to do with Barack Obama, nothing to do with the CIA. Complete bullshit. You know what I mean? Uh, Leave it to the political right to always come up with the most bullshitest conspiracy theories. I don't entertain that stuff. You know, we just had a video on the Kennedys. I don't entertain that shit either. To me, that stuff is like if it was true, it'd be known by now. You know what I mean? What's in the dark will come to light, and that ties back to Wendy Williams. The things that she said, we looked at as conspiracy theories, but they turned out to be true. But she had solid evidence. She didn't just say things. Again, just saying things, and you got to have evidence. Okay, you're making a statement. What's your statement based on? You know what I mean? Like you have evidence. You can't just Michelle Obama's a man, or Jaguar writes things. The stuff she says. Or Gene Deal, going on about the Biggie conspiracies. Puffy had Biggie killed. Where are you getting this from? What are you basing it on? Anyway, guys, peace. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Lisa and David, for contributing. Love you guys. Peace.